Internet issues.
Good afternoon and welcome to the October 19th, 2023 Open Space Conservancy Trust video meeting. I'm Geraldine Poor, the chair of the Open Space Conservancy Trust board, and tonight's meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel. Parks Operations Manager Sam Harb, Sustainability Program Analyst Alana de Regatas, welcome, are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members may be listening to the meeting by phone or via the internet, and welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. Trustees, please ensure your microphones are turned on for the roll call, and Sam will lead that.
Yeah, Chair Poor.
Here.
Vice Chair Ete.
Here.
Secretary Bender.
Here.
Trustee Brissett.
Here.
Trustee Olson.
Here.
Council Liaison Andrew.
Here.
Trustee Hildebrand.
Here.
Thanks. Trustees, before we begin tonight's business meeting, I want to suggest a few rules to help the meeting run smoothly. If a board member has a question, please use the raise hand feature. I'll do my best to recognize trustees in the order in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit himself or herself to one question and one clarifying question if necessary. So each trustee has a chance to ask a question before a board member is given another chance to ask. It's important that each trustee has an opportunity to speak or ask a question before a second question is asked. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those listening in on the meeting. And I have one more little bit to read about public appearances, unless, Sam, do we have any today?
We do not.
So I think I'll skip that paragraph. All right, and I see Lizzie Stone has joined us also. It's hard to be a fly on the wall. The first item of regular business is to review and consider approving the July 20th, 2023 minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 20th, 2023 meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Great. Do we need to clarify? I heard move. So I think Carolyn moved and Craig seconded.
Okay.
All in favor, please say aye, and those opposed say nay. And Sam, will you do the roll call?
Yeah, Chair Poor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Ete.
Aye.
Secretary Bender.
Here. Aye.
Trustee Brissett.
Aye.
Trustee Olson.
Aye.
Council Liaison Andrew.
Aye.
Trustee Hildebrand.
Abstain.
Great. With a 6-vote approval, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Thank you all. The second item of regular business is the presentation of the City of Mercer Island Climate Action Plan. And we welcome Alana de Regatas, Sustainability Program Analyst. We will receive this report and there's no action needed on our part. Thanks, Alana.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me in your meeting today. I'm just going to give a quick run through of the climate action plan that was passed back in April by the council and just how that applies to some of the work that is done for our open space team. So I'm just going to share my screen. And can someone just confirm that you can all see the title slide? Perfect. Okay, so in case anyone is not familiar with the climate action plan, the city of Mercer Island, as I mentioned, completed the first ever climate action plan for the city back in April of this year. And the aim of the plan is to summarize and guide all city actions towards motions that can reduce our community's greenhouse gas emissions and protect our environment from the impacts of climate change. So it's just kind of a way of organizing all of the different actions that we can take into certain focus areas so we can be more deliberate about setting goals and seeing reductions in accordance with those goals. So first, we have to take a look at the greenhouse gas emissions from the whole island, so the community as well as city operations. This plan was through 2020 usage data, and it was projected out for what usage would look like 2030, 2040, and 2050 if no action was taken to try to reduce emissions. So over here, you can see that building electricity, building natural gas are a huge source of emissions, as well as on-road vehicles on the island. Passenger air travel and are the only real big contributors. Everything else, including solid waste and other sources of emissions, are kind of lumped into a much smaller group. So essentially, we're seeing a huge increase in emissions over time if we don't take any action. And so therefore, between legislation already passed by the state and federal government, we're adding on local actions as well to really start to make an impact here. So just a quick overview of the process that went into getting the CAP passed and approved. There was a community-wide survey, there was a presentation of the results to the council, and a lot of essentially back and forth and iteration over the course of over a year in getting this plan fully established. So as I mentioned, it was passed back in the beginning of April of this year. And I joined the city more recently, just in August of this year. So I have been hard at work in reviewing this plan and trying to set some implementation goals here. So as I mentioned, the CAP is divided into several different focus areas where we can identify different ways and different actions that we can take in order to drive down greenhouse gas emissions and just overall provide environmental benefit. The operations, buildings and energy, so both city buildings as well as residential buildings and commercial buildings on the island, although that is a small amount. Transportation, consumption and disposal, so waste and recycling, natural systems, which is what we're going to be mostly focused on today because that's where the open space actions fall into, and also community resilience. So as I mentioned, really digging into the natural spaces focus area, there was 3 specific goals that were called out in the CAP. That there's various actions listed to meet these goals. So the first goal is that the city's tree replacement ratio for trees lost on public lands is at least 5:1. That we see a 5% increase in tree canopy on cover on private land by 2030. And a 10% of public open space transitions from active restoration phase into a monitoring and maintenance phase. And I'll dig into that a little bit more because some of our actions are really targeted at that last piece, and especially the ones I'm going to focus on today. So it's broken out into 2 different strategies with the aim of meeting those goals. So we want to increase urban tree canopy and green space on the island. And how we're looking at measuring that is just seeing an increase in tree canopy acreage and replacement counts for trees. So we have these separate targets. As I mentioned, by 2030, we want to see that 5% increase in tree canopy cover on private land. And this retention or the replacement ratio for trees being 5:1 by 2030. And we also have further out goals for 2050 that all new city plantings are climate adapted species, and that we're seeing a 15% increase in tree canopy cover. The other strategy towards meeting those goals is to foster healthy and resilient natural systems. And we're trying to measure that through an improvement in ecosystem function. So that's really where the different phases of the open spaces comes in, the active restoration phase versus the monitoring and maintenance phase. So we want to see by 2030, 10% of public open space transition from that active restoration to that monitoring and maintenance phase. We also want to see private landowners really participate in these efforts as well, because so much of our land space is private residential property. And by 2050, we have an even more ambitious target to a 50% transition of public open space to that monitoring and maintenance phase. So in order to meet those goals and those specific strategies, we have certain actions called out specifically. So just kind of branching down from the main strategy itself of increasing urban tree canopy and green space, the ways that we're looking to achieve that increase is through a tree planting incentive program, as well as a city-led tree planting, so specifically on city public properties. The second strategy towards fostering healthy and resilient natural systems, we have a host of actions listed there, including water efficient landscape standards, water conservation incentives, green stormwater infrastructure, gray water reuse education, and as I mentioned, this monitoring and maintenance baseline for all city open spaces. This one I'm going to dig into more in a second, as well as open space restoration. So a lot of these actions are just building on things the city is already really doing and just making it more of a broader program and just really setting more specific goals around how we're looking to continue the great work that we're already doing. So as I mentioned from this past slide, the monitoring and maintenance baseline and the open space restoration, those are the two big actions that kind of have a lot of overlap with this group. So I just figured I would give a quick update on the current status of those as I kind of really look towards implementing the actions in this plan. The first one, the monitoring and maintenance baseline, is for all city open spaces to really establish what that looks like. What is the difference between saying that something is in an active restoration phase and what would qualify it as that being in the monitoring and maintenance phase? So in order to know what that looks like, we need to complete an assessment of all city open spaces to really establish where that line sits. And what we're looking to do for that is, starting off before the end of this year, put out a request for a quote for an assessment and have that completed by a contractor by the end of next year. That is our current implementation target for that action. For the specific open space restoration action, it's really building off of the findings from that assessment. So using that baseline data to determine how we're going to tackle getting that increase of a shift of acreage from the active restoration into that monitoring and maintenance phase. And kind of the first step towards that before we can really do too much concrete work, before the assessment is even complete. The levy funded work in Pioneer Park is already kind of moving the needle there towards getting us more in that monitoring and maintenance phase. So that concludes my report. If there are any questions.
Thank you so much. Please raise your hands as you have comments, and I think we will start with Hillary.
Hi, Hillary Atame, Vice Chair. My question for you, Alana, is first of all, thank you. I'm really excited to see how this work unfolds. But my question for you is, with all of the multi-level government attention to the need for climate action plans, such as the ones we're taking, what kinds of grants are we eligible for on the municipal level to implement some of these critical baseline assessments?
There have been a host of grants that have been released from the Department of Commerce, Department of Ecology, and I can say that I'm actively tracking all of those to see which ones we're eligible for and what is going to help us, complete a lot of this work. So there's new ones being announced almost every day, it feels like, at the state and the federal level. So I am diligently trying to track where we can leverage those opportunities as much as possible. At this point, specifically for the open space restoration work, I don't have anything on my radar at this particular moment that I've heard about that would help with this work, but it is something I am keeping an eye open for.
I liked in your slides that you highlighted the voter approval of some of the funding. So we already do have funding underway. Not seeing any other hands raised, I thought I would go next and ask if you could bring up again slide 3. So I was just intrigued with that baseline data that you shared.
Yes.
And specifically, as a data person, I am asking how the passenger air travel number is derived for Mercer Island Mercer Island residents, or in this analysis.
You know, that is a wonderful question. And unfortunately, since I was not here at the time of the cap and the data gathering process, I don't have a very clear memory of where that data came from. The passenger air travel, as I understand it, the intention was to have it be for total island, so total community air travel. So I am not sure exactly how that data was ascertained. But that is a really great question. I'm happy to follow up on it if there's any mechanism for me to do so.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in an email if you're able to find anything.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know the data, the answer is there. I just
Yeah, great. Thank you.
not top of mind. Yeah, of course.
Let's turn now to Tom Hildebrandt.
Yes, also related to the baseline data chart, since one of our goals is to increase tree canopy in private and public lands, there's no bar on the bar graph to show what effect there is of having that tree cover. So that would be an interesting datum to add in the future, showing that we were actually getting carbon offsets by having a healthy forest ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. So this graph was more just for the emissions rather than the kind of the negative, the ways that you can decrease emissions, essentially. So
Yeah.
I believe I know that we have tree count somewhere and that we can definitely do that kind of calculation to see how much are we offsetting based on how many trees are active and healthy on the island. So
Yeah, that's another thing that would be interesting to track over time.
yes, definitely.
I'll go back to more formal and say Trustee Bender.
So, I have a follow-on actually to what both of those questions were. Is there a chart that's already assembled that says if we achieve our goals, here's how all those numbers change?
Yes, actually, there is a chart that shows kind of where we're hoping to see the decrease be. Yeah, essentially like seeing the real kind of actions that are going to drive the biggest change in our overall greenhouse gas emissions is trying to cut down building natural gas as much as possible. So that's a big one. Limiting building electricity. So we're trying to cut down on natural gas by electrifying buildings, right? And adding more electric systems like heat pumps and hot water heaters. But in doing that, we don't want to just increase overall electricity. So we're really needing to find efficiencies as well, so we can drive down electricity usage while we're adding this extra capacity for, say, EVs and whatnot. And really trying to cut down on miles traveled by vehicles and increase public transportation ridership. So yes, there are projections on if we are achieving all of those goals as we're outlining where our emissions will be. And that is also included in the cap. I just kind of pulled out certain graphs just to really highlight certain things. But yeah, that graph specifically is there.
The other thing, I don't know if you know this, but there is a periodic survey of Pioneer Park that sort of assesses the forest health. That would be something, it would be great if this assessment we're doing now could be integrated with that and sort of bring some of that information forward.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so I'm actually working very closely with Sam and Lizzie and trying to make sure a lot of this work is already being done, right? So I'm not trying to duplicate efforts in any way, just trying to see like how we can just build on the great work we're already doing. And just like exactly like you said, integrating that work into these actions. It's just most efficient way to go about it.
Thanks. And Councilmember Anderell?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Alana, so much for your presentation. It's nice to meet you virtually. The question that I have, and I don't think it has so much to do with the business of the Conservancy Trust, but just in general, and you mentioned it, this whole trade-off between natural gas and electricity. I mean, how do we do the math on how that electricity is being produced and whether it's actually cleaner than, say, a direct use of natural gas to heat something, as opposed to, sure, it's a little bit more problematic to use natural gas to power a vehicle, although you can, but it's like natural gas, when you burn it, is hot. It seems like a great source of heat. If you burn it to produce electricity to heat, power an electric furnace, it seems like you're losing something in the translation. So is there a simple way to understand that math?
That's a really good question. I will say that I haven't run the numbers myself, but I know that some very smart people are.
Thank
And
you
yeah,
for your candor.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge to try to really balance. Yeah, if we're trying to increase efficiency overall, there are other challenges with natural gas in terms of just general emissions and, you know, health and safety reasons in the home. If we can try to get it out of there, there's benefits in terms of air quality, just like in your small environment. But in terms of overall efficiency gains, in terms of how the energy is being created, it's a much bigger thing than just Mercer Island having an impact on, because PSC is actively working on their own goals to make their power generation more renewable. Right now, I think it's 75% natural gas. So they're in the process of trying to upgrade their systems while we're also in the process of trying to electrify in the most efficient way possible. So
Great.
essentially a long way of saying there's a lot of stuff happening all at once.
Yeah, and be perfectly clear here, I am not giving you a homework assignment and I am not making a request, but if any information that is a kind of on a simple formula comes to light, that I would certainly appreciate it being forwarded.
Yeah, that is a great call out, and I will definitely take a look at that. Also, as I'm trying to work on building more educational tools around the benefits of these things, that is a great thing to include. So
Thank you.
And Trustee Bursa. With your turn to come off mute.
There we go. Sorry. So I was also saying I like the presentation because it really, you know, kind of boils things down to some pretty easy sorts of figures to understand. The question I have is focused on the open space itself. Obviously, you know, this group is very much focused on increasing the canopy, but do you have any sense, because obviously there are, you know, multi-layered issues around approaching, you know, private home canopies and, you know, municipal canopies and so on. Do you have any sense of what percentage of you know, the open space will contribute to the overall reduction of or yeah, you know,
Yeah.
what we contribute?
I would say I don't have a good sense of that right now,
Yeah.
but that is definitely a good thing to take a look at, kind of leading to or referencing a prior question about seeing like how much
Sure.
are we offsetting with our tree canopy. So
Right. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, if I may interrupt here, this is Lizzie Stone. I'm the Natural Resources Project Manager. I apologize, I'm not able to turn on my camera right now, but I just wanted to add a little bit to that answer. If are y'all able to hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so y'all are asking such great questions. First of all, I'm really appreciating them. I did want to say that there has been tree canopy assessments done at the county level, and also I'm pretty sure at the state level, but the last one was done in 2018. We're going to have more data in 2028, and that data can be broken down to be able to see different land ownership types. So we are able to see the canopy percentage on public land and on park land and private property. And I think one of the reasons that we called out wanting to increase private property canopy cover was because those are the areas that are plantable that don't have the maximum amount of plantable or of canopy cover at this time. A lot of our open spaces, our forested open spaces, have a pretty high canopy cover percentage already, and so there's not really a lot of room to add more canopy because they are so are so forested already. So that's why we had put in that specific private property goal rather than a citywide goal, because that's where there's room to improve. And I guess just to say that data from 2018 does exist and is something that we could share potentially with the group.
Great.
It's actually in a fairly fun to interact with online tool. So I'm excited for y'all to explore it. I think that's all for me.
Thanks, Lizzie. Trustee Bender.
I was just curious about two things you mentioned. That I think one of them that would be very relevant to us would be, the climate adapted species list. If that exists, I would love to see it. It would certainly influence what gets planted in Pioneer Park and other places. I would expect that there's some portion that's native species or becoming native species, and maybe some other stuff that's more general in nature. And the other thing is you talked about water efficient landscaping.
Mm.
If those materials exist, I'd be very interested in seeing them.
Yes, I am very confident those materials already exist. I have heard from talking with our teams about kind of like what plantings we're already doing in public lands. We're already focused heavily on the climate adapted plants. So I know this list exists, so I'm happy to find that and share it.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate this presentation. It's just something that we all got to be thinking about, and it's nice to see it done in a systematic way.
Yeah, of course. Happy to come and present.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Lana, that was great. I have to agree. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. In other business, Sam Harb will present now on city updates and department updates. I think he will. There we go. Thanks, Sam.
All right, just sharing my screen. All right, so we got our department report, October 19th, 2023. City Hall closure, some mention of that earlier. As many of you know, the City Hall has been permanently closed, and a lot of folks are adapting to that, working remotely and such. Our customer service team is still operating and ready to take calls and direct customers where needed. So they are good at what they do, and you can reach them at the phone number or the email below, and they, like I said, they'll just connect with whatever department you need help from. So while City Hall physically is closed, can't walk in there and get the face-to-face that way. We do have folks that are committed to working with the public. Special events, we've got some big special events coming up this next weekend. Saturday, October 21st, we have the Arbor Day celebration hosted with Mercer Island and Mountain Sound Greenway. This is also the opening of the Luther Burbank South Shoreline Trail. So 9:45, there's commemorative tree planting, just sort of kind of a ribbon cutting for the trail project, and then the volunteer planting will follow that. And so if you all haven't been to this new trail yet, it's awesome. It's very impressive and it's accessible. So pretty soon it's going to be full of new plants. And that, if you still want to sign up for that, you can do that via Mountain Sound Greenway or our calendar on the city website. We have a couple Halloween events coming up. We got Trick or Treat in Town Center on October 27th from 4 to 6 p.m. And then we've got Pumpkin Walk October 29th in Mercerdale Park. Few Parks and Natural Resources update related to the climate action plan. We are actively buying and testing out new electric leaf blowers. So we we have funds, just general operating funds, so purchasing equipment, but we also had a allocation of I believe it was ARPA funded grant funding with the climate action plan goals in place to specifically buy and test out some new equipment. So we've got a couple different machines that we're playing with, and with leaf season happening right now, there's good opportunities for that. So that's what we're working on. Ellis Pond Boardwalk was recently pressure washed and stained. That was a big project that a lot of the crew worked on. Walsh Group, they're the contractor working for the King County Sewer Project along the north side of the island, Upper Davis Park. They've started their seasonal occupation of Luther Burbank's, half of Luther Burbank South parking lot, and they'll be there through May 15th. And then we have the Washington Conservation Corps. We are contracting with them for, I believe, about 12 weeks throughout the winter. And they're going to be on the island at different times, just helping us with some restoration projects. Park bench donations have restarted. We've done a few of these this year, and the way this works is folks can go online and they can fill out a form to either contribute to refurbish an old, like a old refurbishable bench, or purchase a replacement bench. So depending on the park and the style of benches that are available, some of them have to be replaced, but some of them can be painted and refurbished that way. This also gives a timeline associated with that. I believe it's 15 years where that donation lasts for the maintenance of that bench. We have these all over the park system, and including Pioneer Park. And just earlier this year, one of the benches, a donated bench, had just sort of settled and was lower than it should have been. It wasn't very comfortable for folks to sit on, so we went ahead and raised that as part of the regular maintenance practice. We got seasonal closures of our beach restrooms, Clark Beach, Groveland, and Luther Burbank Stone Beach. Been a ton of volunteer work going on this year. 71 volunteers contributed 138 hours in September, and we have 10 events scheduled through October. Volunteer coordinator Jordan Fisher trained 7 new course schools this month. Life skills area over in Dean's Children's Park, construction has started and it's ongoing right now. This is a combination of trail and wood features that are being installed throughout the forest in there. And there's a couple pictures. Top right is sort of one of the burned turns, and that's an example of the wooden feature that's built into the ground a little bit. And then we had a Eagle Scout project work on part of the fence in the bottom right in that picture there. So surrounding the bike area, because it's in an area with playgrounds and everything, there's going to be fence sort of separating everything. And parking is impacted in there. So the little Dean's Children's Park parking lot is at limited capacity, and then also the one sort of down the road there, where the baseball area has a lot of equipment and materials being staged there. So parking is going to be impacted for a little while. And more details on that, pretty regular updates are on our Let's Talk page. And then some specific Open Space Conservancy Trust items. We are working on boards and commissions bylaws. We have a draft of an internal draft of a rewrite and legal review. We're basically, updating and standardizing some of our boards and commissions bylaws. I know that the trust has done quite a bit of work on this in the past, and just tailoring it to specific things that the trust does and maybe other boards and commissions don't do, or vice versa. And so we're taking that all into account to make edits on it, and it's going to go through a few different people at the city and legal review, and we're hoping to have a first draft available for you all to view in our January. There have been some just items that were brought up from past meetings for just future discussion, and one of those referenced Native or Indigenous people, and so I just wanted to point out earlier this month we did host a volunteer event on October 7th in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. We reached out to the Snoqualmie tribe and had some communication with them and invited some of their council to attend. They didn't actually end up attending, but we did utilize some of their educational materials to pass out to folks. And as we just continue to develop our volunteer program, we're going to be continuing to reach out to tribes and fostering that relationship just for education and noting their historical uses of the land. Thanks from title transfer, it's still definitely being worked on, but I do not have any updates at this time. So when we have some notable information, and we'll make sure to get that on the agenda for you all to with that information. There were some trail repairs and changes that were brought up earlier in the year. Some of those have happened. This is part of regular maintenance, and then I think there was the one potential closure or reroute we were talking about that ended up being used by contractors, and it just didn't really make sense at the time to close that off. But we are still on the work plan to get those items. And then lastly, there was a topic brought up about how we not really advertise, but how we present information in the parks and bringing things up to modern standards for being able to share information about the land or trees or the forest or the history. And so one thing I wanted to bring up as an example of something we could do is what's called our story map, and the QR is not a typo. It's what it is basically is throughout the island right now we have our public art installation or public art collection, and pretty much all those items have a small display plaque in front of them with the QR code and the title, and that links to this webpage. It's part of our website that kind of shows everything within the map and has information on the art piece and the artist and the history of that. So I point this out as a as we tell our story or want to provide information to the public about the nature of the history or anything like that. This is something that we implemented already, and it's a fairly easy, fun way to link with the public, essentially. Not all I got. Any questions or comments on that?
Thanks, Sam. That was a lot of information. Really appreciate all that. Do any members of the trust board have Yeah, Trustee Bender, please.
Thank you. So I think the QR code thing we have for the art is really terrific. And I think when I mentioned it last time, I was thinking along the lines of something like that to focus on the parks and the vegetation in the park and the environment in the park. Is how do we move in the direction of doing something like that as an educational tool in the parks? And I think Hillary would like to see some integrated information about Indigenous people and how they saw the land and used the land. I also think it might be interesting to just talk about, I know South Mercer Island used to be a bunch of dairies. I don't, so I think, is there a way to sort of take that as a model and move it into a park specific sort of discussion?
Yeah, it's a really broad question. I think if we're just talking about Pioneer Park, that's a little bit easier perhaps, but I can tell you anything to do with parks as a large scale, you know, signage or anything like that is a real project for sure. So, specific things to Pioneer Park, I think is definitely more manageable and could be a real benefit to it. It would essentially be a supplement to or an enhancement of the kiosks and some of the stuff we have already. Just an update to it. So
Yeah, I mean, I think Pioneer Park is the place to start. Is there somebody, how do we get that coordinated and started and the ball rolling?
yeah, so we assisted our crews assisted with the like specific to the art collection, you know, installing all the little pedestals and things. I'll follow up with the staff member that you know is behind that program, and we'll see what's involved.
Super, thank you.
Vice Chair Ete.
Thank you. Sam, just to piggyback on what Marie was saying, I feel like there's so many opportunities, specifically in Pioneer Park, right? Not only because it is so heavily trafficked and I think beloved by the community, but I wonder how much of the on the ground work can be done through the forest stewardship program. I know that a number of us are already stewards of the parks and open spaces. And I feel like a lot of the newer stewards especially would be really game to contribute to that educational effort if that would somehow ease the project management end of things or bring the costs down. And then secondly, I wonder if any of that funding for such a program could come from the CAP initiatives.
Could you repeat your last word? What was the proposal for?
Oh, the last thing I was wondering, Jerry, was if any of the money for the CAP education about climate change and the ways that we can build resiliency in our open spaces can be used to fund these kinds of efforts, if that would somehow lessen the burden on the city.
Yeah, I'd have to check on that.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Vice Chair Bender. Nope, Secretary
That would
Bender.
be Secretary Bender. Thank you. Just to follow up on that, the other source of funding obviously is the bond we just passed. And I actually was thinking that that was a good pool of money to sort of draw upon. So that's just another thing to look into.
My brain was also going where Hillary's was, and I was thinking about in the past we've had scout projects often do work in the parks, and so Sam, please let us know if you would what feedback you get at our January meeting perhaps, and if this is something that people who have ideas about it should get together and make recommendations, or if there's something that the city could work from. So yeah, we'd love to hear back more from you. And we're open to participating, I think is what you're hearing from all of us, or from those of us who've spoken up. Great. Any more discussion for staff? And we'll turn to quadrant reports. So the order listed here is to start with Northwest quadrant, which is Tom and Hillary, and Northeast, Marie and Craig, and then Southeast will be Carolyn and me. So I'll kick it over to Tom and Hillary. Thanks.
Well, I have not been out in the park much for quite a while. My attention's been directed elsewhere, so I don't actually have any information to impart.
Good.
I was going to go ahead and say that I've spent most of my time in the Southeast recently. And I also have been drawn away from the Northwest for a while, mostly because of my dog. He's much more better behaved in the Southeast. But I have noticed some really incredible changes going on there. I don't want to pull away from whomever's quadrant assignment that is. But I do say that the times I have spent in the Northwest solo, that it is abundantly clear still that a lot of attention is being paid. I really do see what's the name of the particular section where we erected the fence on the interior that used to have a lot of trampling by dogs, and then Kim had put up that barrier to protect the big planting there. That area specifically is looking really excellent in terms of the way that the revegetation has come about. One question I do have is, with the parks levy, is there any way to extend that fence line? Because there is still very much ways for animals to get in there and disrupt the plantings. But I do like seeing, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago that has really started to kick in. And another thing that I really noticed is that a lot of the barriers where the earth core plantings had been done on the perimeter have clearly been paid attention to, in the ways that there are very large logs that are used to border those plantings, and those seem to be holding up really well, and people are minding them and respecting them. So I really do appreciate seeing the ways in which the planted areas are being protected. And yeah, way to go. And the Southeast, I think the water bars are extremely effective, and I wonder if there is more funding and attention that will be looking at how to utilize those in other parts of the park as well.
Sam, do you want to respond to any of that now, or do you want to wait till we're all done, or would you like to just take notes and report back in January?
Well, no, I mean, we can finish it now. It's great. I think as far as funding on the trail stuff, that's we do work every year on that. It's a little bit more of just capacity of the crew to be able to get the repair to the job and in the area and all that. We do have folks working more this winter, so we have kind of a different seasonal schedule. And like I mentioned before, we've got the WCC crew, and so that if the conditions are right, there could be some attention paid to water bars or anything like that, if it makes sense to do that, depending on weather and all that. And then on the fence, if there's barriers or fences we need to extend, and that's something that the Eagle Scouts love to do. We haven't had an Eagle project in Pioneer for a while, but I know, speaking with the Quinn, who helped with the bike skills area, there's other scouts around. So whether a split rail fence or something like that's pretty relatively low cost and fairly easy for volunteers to do as well, whether it's a scout group or something like that. But yeah, we'll look at those areas, and if it makes sense operationally to add barriers where stuff's getting trampled and high use areas and things, then we can take that approach.
Yeah, I think you guys have been like really, really innovative and effective at finding ways to do that in such a heavily used, like mixed use quadrant, especially. So I'm really grateful for all the ways in which you guys have done that, especially in really tight budgetary times.
Thanks. Trustee Burseth?
Yeah, I just need some clarification. I was reviewing the minutes from the last meeting, and I thought we had shifted the assignments for the quadrants. So I wonder if we could get some clarification about that.
Let's look at those minutes right here. And it looks like you might have a comment on the northwest section, perhaps. Yeah, I see from the minutes last week that you are northwest.
Yeah, exactly. No, I
Great.
just, I was through there and I think, it's nicely groomed and it's, I think there were comments last time about, how really nice it is. And having been in the other quadrants in the past, which are a little more natural and rougher, it's a really, really nice walkable area now.
That's great. Let's move over to the northeast quadrant, which has Hillary and Marie listed from last meeting's minutes, and it might also have input from Craig if Craig thinks he's on this area. So northeast, and let's defer to staff here. Sam, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd have to double check the video exactly to see if I made a mistake on the minutes, but I thought after the election of officers, we changed the minutes, but I thought we'd kept the reports the same, but changed the assignments. So if that's not correct, I'll just go after the fact of just those minutes.
Great. Why don't we finish the report outs and then we can say what we believe we're responsible for or what we would like to be responsible for. Okay, Secretary Bender, please.
So my recollection is I moved from the southeast to the northeast. So actually today we, against his will, put our golden retriever on a leash and went to the northeast. It's looking beautiful. And I have to say, despite all the rain we've had, I didn't see water erosion happening in places. So the trails are holding up really well. And it's beautiful. I love it. The only comment I would have is the parking on 68th, not the one at the corner of IMS and 68th, or the one farther down the road. There's a bunch of overhanging trees that's making it very difficult to park there. So if somebody could just go in and spend a half an hour trimming, that would be super. We do spend time in the northwest just because we have an off-leash dog, and the trail work there is really good. I mean, really, there's so many places where it used to be muddy that have been filled in with gravel. It just makes everything much more pleasant. So thank you for that. So that's that.
Thanks, Marie. Who else believes they're on the northeast quadrant? I would posit Hillary or Craig from the information I have.
I'm in the southeast now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Craig, what have you noticed in the southeast quadrant?
I hadn't been in there for a while, and I was, as Hillary was saying, it is transformational what is going on with the ivy removal, especially, and the blackberry removal. The trails look pretty good. I was out there last week. It was pretty wet, but everything's looking really good. And once again, it's just such a thrill to see all the ivy disappearing. I mean, the volunteer work that Jordan's coordinating is very good, and I'm really impressed. It's just a pleasure to be able to hang out in the park. Yeah. And it looks great.
I have to agree. I'm there also. I would echo your congratulations. And then for one small question, I guess, to Sam, I have noticed just off the street, or right on the well, it would be the western edge of the southeast quadrant, there is a tree that seems to have lost a lot of branches, and I'm used to clippings and debris being left to be reabsorbed into the ground in the forested areas. And I wondered if it is true that the material on the ground is there for the same reason, for mulch and that kind of thing. do you know the tree that I'm talking about in kind of an open area?
Yeah, it's in the lawn between the two trails.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just a lot of material to get cleaned up.
it's, so the intent is to clean it up in the, okay, good, thanks. Okay, so let's try and clear this up. I know I sense that I was southeast and Craig is southeast. For northeast, Marie claimed that, and do we remember, does anyone want to claim the northeast? And what about northwest?
I'll do the Northeast with Marie. I thought that's what I was on, but I can't remember since we've been trading so much.
Yeah. And for northwest, I believe that leaves Tom and Carolyn, yes?
Yeah, and I commented on that earlier.
Yeah, no, yeah, good, I was.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
I
so
just want to make sure I'm focusing in the right place. I would say, and that despite the confusion, I think most of us are, looking at multiple quadrants. So I think that despite the fact we may have confusion about who's reporting about which ones, we're all spending considerable time in all of them.
Really, really lucky.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That so completes our quadrant reports. We now have a point on the agenda where we could look at future discussion items. Our next meeting will be in January. Are there items we want to make sure we're ready to discuss in January? I know Sam previewed that the bylaws will be part of that discussion. Oh, great. Marie, please.
So this is something, it just sort of is a discussion for us. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I just, watched the school board meeting, and they have 2 representatives from the student body who participate in every meeting, provide feedback and tell the board what the student body is thinking, what they've been up to. And I have for a long time thought we have a hole in our membership. And we really should have, a young person, a high school person, who has an interest in ecology and forestation and things like that. Just to sort of, if nothing else, give us some presence at the high school level. And the impediment to that seems to be, in my mind, the fact that we have 4-year terms. And a high school kid who's a junior is gonna think, well, 4 years, I don't have 4 years, I'm going to college. And I think, we should encourage high school kids to be interested in the board. And just like any of us, if I decide to move to Milwaukee, well, I'm not gonna do my 4 years on the board. And I think we could informally just sort of agree that a high school who's a junior is probably only going to serve 2 years, and then we're going to have to fill the hole, but we do that all the time anyway. And I don't know that there needs to be any formalization of that thought, so much as that's just how things go. So I just want to throw that out for discussion. And I might also just talk with the school and see if there's a way to, it's a push-pull kind of thing. How to get kids interested in doing things like that. I just would like to know what other people's thoughts are. And it could be next time. If we're supposed to be doing next time things, that's a next time thing.
Council member?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great idea to get that perspective. I don't know that we can actually, under our current rules, designate a spot on the trust as a, reserved for a particular class. But if what you're saying is have them attend in an advisory capacity or a perspective capacity rather than a voting capacity, I think it's a wonderful idea to get that kind of perspective and feedback.
Yeah, and I was not even thinking, I don't think we should designate a spot. I'm not a big believer in that sort of thing, but it's more a matter of reaching out to the high school kids and saying, hey, this board exists, we'd love to have your perspective. And I'd rather have them on the board than have them sort of sitting as an observer. I think full participation would be wonderful. And you know what? I mean, we may not get a high school kid interested, but I do think it's worth reaching out to the community and saying, you would be welcome.
I like it too, and I'm also wondering if that is something, it seems to me to be related to the bylaws, and so maybe we could ask Sam to consider that as he brings back the bylaws. I heard Council Member Andrell speak to a dedicated seat, and you say no, that wasn't what you had in mind, but I think if they were going to be more than just visiting and sitting and watching the meetings or participating in the meetings, they might need to have a seat under the bylaws. You're not,
I'm
you don't
thinking
see
much
that.
more
Okay.
informally.
Okay.
We have nothing more than going to the high schools or the PTAs and saying, hey, one of you might be interested, just like all the rest of us.
Okay. Thanks. Are there other items for next meeting? I would like to ask if staff could bring back a little firmer update on the title transfer, like what the next steps are and when it's expected to be complete. And then we'll look forward to the bylaws, it sounds like. And then, sorry, one more from me. This is what happens when I have time to prepare for a meeting. I know that we finished letterboxing, and often at our November meeting, we would have a chance to honor the participants who turned in their letterboxing booklets. And I wonder if it seems like there was kind of a lesser version of the program this year, but I do know that the program took place, and I wondered if there was any response back from the Parks Department, if there were participants who turned in books, and if there was any kind of ceremony anticipated, or if that might take place somewhere else.
Yeah, we did have participants. I don't know exactly how many. I think we could definitely bring that back in a future meeting to recognize those folks.
Okay, great. Gone. 6:05. I'll move back to the script and say the next open space meeting is scheduled for January 18th at 5 p.m. There being no other business to come before the Open Space Conservancy Trust, the time is now 6:05 p.m. I don't need to ask for a motion, so the meeting is adjourned. And trustees, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening, stay healthy, and stay safe.